Hold on to your butts.
Da-da-da. You were saying?
Welcome to episode 154 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Tonight, as always, I am joined by the most awesome Civil War nerd I know, Darren Weeks. And y'all listening to this have had 5 years of me doing these horrible introductions. As always, I am your other co-host, Mary. Anyway, welcome to episode 154, Darren. How are you doing?
Great, Jess. I think your intros cannot get better. You unleashed that diamond. So what's going on? What's happening with you?
It's been pretty good. It's been a busy few weeks. We're happy to be back here at the old Breakfast Club headquarters recording again. We haven't been able to do a YouTube live stream in a couple weeks just because we've been a bit busy. But we're going to try and do one again soon and hopefully be announcing a roundtable. But here we are back recording again, episode 154. We are into the sixth year of our podcast, fifth anniversary.
Wow. Yep, that's unbelievable. We've done this for 5 full years, which I will let you know is longer than the Civil War lasted.
It is.
By the way. So anyhow, what's going on?
Anyway, how are you doing?
Oh, it's swimmingly. It's fantastic. It's cool weather is here. It's almost football. It's ready to go. We're recording again. So what could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. I hope. Jeez. Anyway, what are you drinking tonight?
Oh, thank you. I'm drinking it. It is it's not a beer tonight, Mary. It's a hard cider. It's called Atomic Dog Sweet Blend, and our good friends near from Gettysburg, where we got it. So that's what we have, and I'm drinking it out of my William Sherman. I'm the reason country music is so sad mug, and I'm using that mug today because Sherman is going to make an appearance today, Mary. And what about yourself? What are you drinking today?
I am just drinking the lager from Appalachian Brewing Company. Kept it simple tonight, and I'm drinking it out of my General Grant mug, which General Grant is going to be kind of not like obviously the lead person in this episode, but he is going to be mentioned in it because he does play a role in the life of the person that we're going to talk about. And that person is General James Burbsy McPherson.
That's right. And it's important, Mary, that we talk about this because this is a guy that really he's another Union general, but whose untimely death probably robbed the country of a possible presidency. If not for a man, he could have commanded the entire army someday, let alone president. And I must say, though, I say McPherson and not McPherson because I know a guy with this name who's Scottish, and he scolded me one time, Mary. So imagine someone yelling at me, pronouncing it, saying I was wrong, saying it's McPherson. There is no fear in McPherson.
I went to school too with a guy who had the same last name, and it's funny every time I mention, because I'm friends with him on Facebook, and every time I mention James McPherson in a post, he will always like it, which is fun. I don't know if it's because he's distantly related to him or if it's just the same last name, but it's hilarious. That's the only time, that's the only time Dan will pop up on my timeline.
Oh, that's good. But when you do study McPherson, it's definitely a case of what if regarding his early death at the Battle of Atlanta. And truthfully, the story of his death is probably the most compelling part of his story, but we'll get to that later. So just some background information here.
He was born on November 14th in 1828 in Clyde, Ohio, which is near Lake Erie. I've been to the town a couple times. It is still a very, very small town, kind of blink and you'll miss it. He is going to leave home at the age of 13 to be a clerk in the Green Springs store of Robert Smith. He's going to attend the Norwalk Academy in Norwalk, Ohio. Now, Robert Smith, getting back to him, this is who McPherson's going to be a clerk for from the age of 13. It is going to be Smith that helps him to get an appointment at West Point.
Right. It's funny, McPherson, he mentioned he's from Clyde. That's Sandusky County. Is where Tommy Boy's famous, right?
Yep.
The movie. He's going to be
Cedar Point.
That's right. The son of William and Cynthia McPherson. You mentioned before he is of Scottish descent, but his family actually came from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. James' mother's family was from Richmond, Massachusetts, of all places, Mary, is in Western Mass where the dragons live, that way out there, right?
Western Mass people think they're from Boston?
Oh, absolutely. But William McPherson, I know you jumped ahead a little bit, but I've got some more stuff on here. William McPherson, like many in the area, was a farmer.
You mean James? Oh, sorry, William.
William, the father. You should pay attention. He was a farmer who also owned a blacksmith shop in Clyde, as well as a 160-acre farm. Now, young James grew up on that farm, and when he was 13 years old, his father, William, he had suffered with some sort of undisclosed mental illness, which meant he could no longer work. So James had to take a job at the aforementioned store by Robert Smith, who was also the local postmaster. Now, James used every spare moment when he wasn't working to try and cobble together some sort of education, which meant he ran a lot, is what he did. James worked at Smith's store for 6 years to support the family, which included 3 younger siblings, Emmeline, Billy, and Russell. Now, on September 16th, 1847, his father William will die, and James faced the reality of taking care of his mother Cynthia, as well as those siblings, and trying to continue his education. And here is when he turns 19, to your point, Mary. He will earn that appointment to West Point, but he has to defer it for a year. So he has to, because he has to work.
So I feel like he would have been, by the time he gets to West Point, he's 20 years old. He's going to be older than some of his other first-year classmates.
He will. He's going to attend that Norwalk Academy you mentioned, which is about 25 miles from the family home in Clyde, which did allow him to attend school and also to continue to work and support his family. Now, eventually, when McPherson did make it to West Point, he basically, all that self-study paid off. Because you know where he finished in his class, Mary.
He is going to graduate first in his class, and he proves himself to be a skilled engineer, horseman, and tactician.
Yeah.
And
that class of 1853 was star-studded. It included Phil Sheridan, one John Bell Hood we'll talk about.
I don't know if we call him star-studded.
The gallant John Bowen is in his class, as well as John Schofield. And like you just said, when you graduated at the top of your class at West Point at that point, you became an engineer.
Yeah, you get like a sweet deal with that. And he's going to be directly appointed to the Corps of Engineers with the rank of brevet second lieutenant. And also in the year following his graduation, and this guy, I think, shows like just, probably not just McPherson's intelligence, but just how he's able to pick up, what he's learned at West Point. But I think he's also a very personable person, I think he probably made friends pretty quickly and all that. And he just leaves, I think, a positive impression on anyone who he meets. So in the year following his graduation, he is going to be the assistant instructor of practical engineering at the military academy. And this position had never been given to an officer as young as McPherson. So as I said, this is already showing that from an early age, he's making an impact, and he's also quite talented. And likely, to your point, like that you said earlier, it's likely from all that studying he did in his early years, but he's also able to pick up what he's learning at West Point really well.
Well, I think when you self-study, and you see a lot of people who do the Civil War thing, self-study people tend to know as much as a lot of different people because you're always reading.
Well, look at Abraham Lincoln.
Oh.
Got the hat.
So McPherson worked on that, on those development at school, but then he also got a job in New York City from 1854 to 57 as part of that U.S. Corps of Engineers. Now, he then helped build Fort Delaware in 1857, and from 1857 to 1861, McPherson worked on a fort in San Francisco Bay, which would be known as Fort Alcatraz. Now, Alcatraz eventually became a Civil War prison and later a military prison. On October 12th, 1933, Fort Alcatraz was sold to the United States Department of Justice and became the famous Alcatraz Penitentiary. Goodness gracious.
What's on your mind?
I don't know what's going on with this Atomic Dog cider here. It's the famous Alcatraz Penitentiary.
Is that where Ledley was hanging out and Iverson?
I think exactly might have been. In any case. But this is where James McPherson, his history is going to meet Al Capone. Not really, but that's where their little mergers take place. But in the years leading up to the outbreak of the Civil War, McPherson was promoted to first lieutenant to recruit engineering troops for duty. When the war breaks out in April of 1861, McPherson had requested transfer to where?
He requested transfer back.
I'll give you a hint.
East.
It's on my shirt.
Yeah, he requested transfer back east. But I think one thing to mention before we get into the Civil War and all that is that McPherson is said to have been a very handsome, worldly, and personable fellow. You look at pictures of him and he looks like he's smiling, which is rare for the time. And he's a favorite among fellow officers. And when he's living in San Francisco, also a favorite of San Francisco society. Now, him being a favorite among fellow officers is going to carry through to the Civil War, as we're going to see. But McPherson, according to his friend James Wilson, is said to have had a very sunny and hopeful disposition. And he stood just over 6 feet tall with a full brown beard. He also got along well with reporters, which is I'm sure that was quite interesting. Flash forward to the Atlanta campaign, and he's with Sherman, and Sherman hates reporters, said that he could send them to hell and they'd have, reports before noon. But it is during this time in San Francisco that McPherson is going to meet a woman named Emily Hoffman. And she is from a prominent merchant family in Baltimore, and she had come to California to help care for her sister's children. Now, interestingly enough, General William T. Sherman knows the sister and Emily's brother as well, which is just a small world back then. So McPherson and Emily soon become engaged, and a wedding is planned, but it has to be put off, like many weddings in the Civil due to this, because of the outbreak of the Civil War. Now, Emily is a little bit younger than James. She was born in 1839, and as I said, she's from a very wealthy family from Baltimore. So that leads us into the beginning of the Civil War, where they are engaged and they're having to put off their wedding because of that.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that too. The other thing about her family, this family, they're very Southern. They're very pro-secession.
Yeah.
They ain't fans of the Union. So,
But she's very Union.
Right, but that'll be an issue. We'll talk about that later on. But, when the war does break out, he does come to Boston, and eventually in November of 1861, McPherson will petition for the position of aide-de-camp on General Henry Halleck's staff, who was a commander of the Department of Missouri at that point. Soon after, he finds himself in St. Louis, now with the rank of lieutenant colonel and assistant engineer of the Department of Missouri. Now, from there, McPherson he was named as chief engineer to a brigade under the command of one U.S. Grant, who's right on your coffee mug right there, in what will eventually become the Army of the Tennessee. Now, the rest of McPherson's career in life would be spent under command of Grant.
Yeah, and McPherson is also the type of person that he's very, very loyal, to whoever his commanding general is. In this case, it's General Grant, but he's also proving himself, to have courage when under fire, and he's very, very professional. And Grant is said, in Donald L. Miller wrote a really awesome book about Vicksburg, and he details this relationship between Grant and McPherson. He said that he is treated like Grant treats him like an adopted son. And Grant said of McPherson that he had risen solely on his own merit. So McPherson's not one of these guys out, looking to get, a higher rank or whatever by trying to whatever connections they might have in Washington, right? Like he's not that type of person. This is solely, Grant says this is because of how talented of a guy he is, right? And as I said, Grant treats McPherson like an adopted son. So they had a very close relationship.
McPherson was that guy that everybody liked, and he looked like a soldier. Like I said, he stood 6 feet tall. He was built like an athlete. Probably had rock hard abs from riding that horse. But according to a soldier in the ranks, and there's a quote now, he, quote, possessed the most happy manner with the grace and gentleness of a friend with the dignity, courage, faith, and manliness of a soldier. Oh, my.
He's walking around. that person that is always cheerful on Monday mornings? And they're like, hey, how's it going?
Certainly isn't you.
Like, whatever. But how they're like, hey, how's it going? Did you have a good weekend? Well, that's McPherson, I think.
Oh, yeah. But in February of 1862, McPherson was the chief engineer in Grant's district of Cairo, where he saw action as Grant's, in his overwhelming, victory at Fort Donelson there, right? McPherson will get promoted to the rank of brigadier general by Grant personally on August 19th of 1862. Just 2 months later, on October 3rd and the 4th, he commanded a detachment at the Battle of Second Corinth in Grant's absence. Now, McPherson's star was on the rise, and immediately after Corinth, on October 8, 1862, he was promoted to Major General, taking command of the 17th Corps in the Army of the Tennessee, again under Grant. So under his command of that 17th Corps were divisions commanders like John Blackjack Logan, John MacArthur, Isaac Quimby, and the awesomely facially haired Francis J. Herron, Mary.
Yep.
So he had an all-star troop under him. McPherson led this division during the Siege of Vicksburg from May 18th to July 4th, 1863. And when it was finally over, Grant chose McPherson, Herron, and Blackjack Logan to lead that federal procession into the city and accept the formal surrender under the old oak tree there by Confederate General John C. Pemberton.
Yeah, when he tried to pull his friends and neighbors card.
He certainly tried.
But before this too, I just want to mention that, in Shiloh, this is going to be kind of now this is not his first time meeting Sherman, but that's when they really start getting to know each other, is at Shiloh. So he's got General Sherman in his life as well. And on the Vicksburg campaign, McPherson is one of the, he's one of the top engineers. And the geography of Vicksburg, I've never been there, but for anybody who has, I'm sure you know that the geography of the area, it proves quite challenging because it's swamps, it's bayous, meandering waterways. There's probably lots of Rosewoods clowns in there too that they're having to deal with.
Goes without saying.
And so his first assignment on the Vicksburg campaign is to deal with what's called Lake Providence. And after he and Grant had reconnoitered the area, Grant concluded there's nothing that I don't think this is going to become of anything. But at this point, it's any port in a storm. So he is going to have McPherson try and clear a pathway through this Lake Providence area and to try and navigate these boats to get them past Vicksburg. And Grant lets that work go on. And Grant is, as I said, he's desperate. And he tells McPherson, if you think there is a reasonable prospect of the river making a channel through the bayous, you may prosecute it. And at all events, clear out the channel of the timber in it and let the water in to see what it will do. Well, it doesn't happen. Grant ends up pulling him from that because he shifted over to the Yazoo Pass, which is another part of the Vicksburg campaign, and much of this pass had been cleared away. So Lake Providence doesn't really do anything, but he's got McPherson still working on it till he pulls him for the Yazoo Pass. And as you said, McPherson's going to continue on the Vicksburg campaign, and on July 4th, 1862, it's him that's going to lead the troops into Vicksburg.
Yeah, I mean, that just goes to show how he was. I mean, this is a long campaign that took that long, and he's one of the guys to go in there to take the formal surrender from Pemberton.
Yep.
So it just goes to show, again, how much the apple of the eye he was for Grant, and especially Sherman, we'll talk later on.
Yeah, exactly. Now, he's not given command of an army until March 12th, 1864. And this is when he is going to come under the command of the Army of the Tennessee, after Sherman is promoted to command all armies in the West.
Mm-hmm. He also got another promotion, too, not around the same time, as he got promoted to Brigadier General in the regular army to go along with his Major General rank in the volunteers. So he was kind of taking them both. And not only that, but he's going to basically command Sherman's former Army of the Tennessee, like you said, which made up the right wing of Sherman's army when they began the Atlantic campaign on May 7th of 1864. And this is when we got to talk a little bit about Emily again.
Yeah.
Before the campaign began, McPherson made one request to Sherman.
Yeah, and that is he wants to go to marry Emily. And Sherman at first, he grants the request. So there's McPherson en route to Baltimore thinking he's going to get to marry Emily. And then he gets orders to go back to Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, he wants to go to Baltimore to marry her, unless he just wants to get to the Red Sox, demolish the Orioles. And I mean, who knows? It was one of the other ones. But again, like you said, Sherman initially said it's fine. But unfortunately, once the campaign began, Sherman had to revoke McPherson's leave, pull out his nope card, and told him he'll have to wait, which is going to prove to be a very sad part of the story.
Yep, and this is not this is something that happens a lot during the Civil War. This is what happens to Pat Claiborne as well. When he wants leave to go marry Sue Tarleton, he thinks he's almost got it, and then Hood's like, nope, you can't go, sorry.
No, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but everything's for the most part was soft serve and DQ blizzards at this point for McPherson.
Yeah.
But once the Atlantic campaign began, it really kind of went downhill. May 9th, 1864 at Rocky Face Ridge in Winfield County, Georgia. This is where McPherson is going to command that 25,000 man in Sherman's third column. He'll run into a small Confederate force entrenched outside of Resaca, and he'll pull out, and he'll fall back to Snake Creek Gap. And this is going to ruin the chance that helps Sherman, hoping to trap Joseph E. Johnson's Army of Tennessee. And afterwards, Sherman's going to tell McPherson, quote, "You missed the opportunity of a lifetime." Yeah,
and this is also the time that Sherman, I think he gets wind that McPherson's also a little bit annoyed with him, that he hasn't been able to go. He was called back. And Sherman actually writes Emily a letter during the Atlanta campaign, just asking her, begging her to be patient. And this is where Sherman states that he knew her brother and sister in California. So he's trying to set up that I'm familiar with you. And he also writes that I fear that that weighing mighty matters of state, but lightly in the realm of love, you feel that McPherson gives too much of his time to his country and too little to you. And Sherman also mentions that his rise in profession has been rapid, steady, and well earned. And Sherman explains to her that because McPherson commands an army and department, it is more difficult for him to take leave. And he says, there is no rest for us in this war till you and all can look about you and feel there is reason and safety in the land. Sherman also writes, I will not offend the girl he loves, so he knows he's probably ticked her off. And he ends by saying, be patient, and I know that when the happy day comes for him to stand by your side, as one being identical in heart and human existence, you will regard him with a high respect and honor that will convert simply love into something sublime and beautiful. So basically saying, be patient, and it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I can't even think of too many times when a commanding general is going to write a letter to someone's girl like that. But again, it just goes to show how much he had respect for McPherson and how much he knew the family with them. But, McPherson continues in this Atlantic campaign, and after, he ends up at Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, he's going to get pantsed by William Wayne Loring.
Yeah.
So again, he's not hitting everything here. But on July 17th of 1864, Confederate President Jefferson Davis is going to replace Johnson with McPherson's West Point classmate John Bill Hood in the last gasp try to save the city of Atlanta from Sherman. We've talked about these battles in the Atlantic campaigns. We're not going to hit details of all these different things. But despite the battlefield setbacks, Sherman still considered McPherson one of his top generals. And within a few days of Hood taking command, the Union Army was surrounding Atlanta and poised to capture that vital Southern Railroad hub and supply hub, which would basically be the mortal blow of the Confederacy.
Well, McPherson does tell him, because he'd been a classmate roommate of Hood at West Point, he tells Sherman that Hood is not going to give up Atlanta without a fight. And Sherman at this news I think he's happy about it because, like with Joseph E. Johnson, it had been like this game of cat and mouse. It's like he doesn't, I don't know if he could quite figure out what Johnson was trying to do. And I think he felt like, when McPherson says, oh, he's going to fight, Sherman's like, good, this is what we want.
Yeah. So jump ahead to July 22nd, 1864, and Sherman's going to be outside Atlanta at his headquarters at a place called the Augustus Hurt House. And he's meeting with his generals, discussing his plan and his strategy to take Atlanta. Now, during the meeting, the sound of gunfire erupted on the Union left. This is in the flank where McPherson's army was located. And earlier in that day, Confederates in Patrick Cleburne's division were massing near the Union left flank. On picket duty that morning was a guy named Captain Richard Beard. He was part of Major Richard Pearson's 5th Confederate Infantry. Now, Beard wrote the most extensive and detailed account of the events of July 22nd, 1864, in an article he submitted on July 27, 1875, Mary, 11 years later, to a newspaper in Tennessee and Nashville called the Union American. Now, Captain Beard wrote that they were on picket duty that day and were called back to their regiment, again, the 5th Confederate Infantry, who was part of Patrick Cleburne's division. They were ordered to move with the rest of the division towards Atlanta along the Decatur Road and strike the left flank of Sherman's army, which was again under command of James McPherson. He said each man was given 60 rounds of ammunition and placed in a battle line around noontime on the 27th. Now, Cleburne's division had marched all night to get to this point. But then they were ordered by Cleburne to march straight forward and not to turn left nor right until they reached the Union breastworks. Cleburne's an aggressive fella, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as the Rebs started to move, Confederate artillery opened up, and the Rebs began to run through the woods, ducking the clowns, and running all through the Federal pickets. This was the gunfire that Sherman heard from the Augustus Hurt House.
Yep.
So, since the sound of battle were along McPherson's line, Sherman, hey, this is not for nothing, but why don't you go there and check it out? So McPherson will mount up, and he will ride over with his staff to investigate and report his findings to him when he returns. I don't want to give away the ending here, Mary, but it's going to be, unfortunately, the last time Sherman will see McPherson alive.
Yeah.
Now, as the rebels pushed through the woods, their battle line began to fall apart, and many of the men got separated. This is what happened to Captain Beard's company. They got separated. They were all by themselves. Cleburne's division would get pushed back by McPherson's troops, which caused even more confusion in the rebel ranks. But what happened next remained unknown to Sherman and the Union Army for the next 11 years. Despite the fact they tried to spin it as something that it wasn't, according to Captain Beard, his company, which had become detached from the rest of the regiment, came to an edge of a road that was parallel to their march. At that moment, he saw a Union general on a horse riding with some staffers and a bodyguard. Beard says he knew the officer's rank had to be no lower than a corps commander based on the entourage he was with. He said McPherson looked up and was surprised to see a rebel line just in front of him because he just ridden straight into Beard's men. Captain Beard rose his sword at the Union general and demanded his surrender. According to Beard, McPherson politely tipped his hat, smiled, but then spun his horse to the right and tried to speed off as fast as he could with his horse in full gallop. Standing next to Captain Beard was a corporal named Robert Coleman. Beard ordered Coleman to shoot the escaping officer. McPherson was leaning forward on his horse to protect himself, and just as he was riding under a large tree, Coleman fired, hit McPherson in the back, dropping him off the horse almost immediately. The ball entered his back and went upward before exiting his body. It passed near his heart, killing him almost instantly. Now, Beard said he approached McPherson's body and was on his knees with his face on the ground, and it appeared that he was killed instantly. Beard wrote, quote, "He was as magnificent a picture of manhood as I ever saw." One of McPherson's staffers, who was lying wounded, was lying nearby, and Beard asked him, "Who is that man lying here?" And the staffer responded with tears in his eyes, "Sir, it is General McPherson. You have killed the best man in our army." Now, Captain W.A. Brown of Mississippi, he grabs McPherson's hat that was stuck on that large tree he rode under, but swore it was the only piece of clothing he took or anyone took.
Yeah, because there was rumors that they basically stripped his body, right?
And this is important. We'll get to this here in a little bit, and that's going to be a big issue on the Union side. But Union troops quickly approached, and bullets began to zip around. And Beard and his men, they issued Special Order GTFO while they were standing over McPherson's body. Beard ordered his men to move to their right flank, but Major Richard Pearson, who was commanding the regiment's left, didn't hear the order. So they ended up marching to the right, basically right into the Union line themselves, and Beard and his whole company got bagged and shipped off to a Union prison. So they all got caught. Now, most of McPherson's staff got away unscathed, and when they returned to the Hurt House, one of them rode to Sherman to tell him that McPherson had been, quote, either had been killed or shot. Now, after dispersing Beard's men, they soon were able to recover McPherson's body, where it was taken back to Sherman's headquarters. Now, Sherman had one of his staff remove a door from the Hurt House and laid it on the floor and put McPherson's body on it. A doctor examined his body and confirmed that he was shot in the back and died instantly. Now, the death of James McPherson affected Sherman deeply, and he paced the floor of the Hurt House as he stood over the body, staring at it while still giving orders to his staff.
Yeah, he was apparently inconsolable, and he would cry, and then he would stop and give orders, and then he would start going on about, just how much McPherson had meant to him. And Sherman does say that the country has lost one of its best soldiers, and I have lost my best friend.
I mean, this is a guy, again, he was very popular.
Yeah.
The Hurt House is going to begin to come under fire by the approaching Confederates, and Sherman was afraid that the house was going to catch on fire, so he had the body removed to Marietta, Georgia, and then to Cincinnati, of all places, before finally arriving home in Clyde, Ohio. Remember McPherson was a battle cry amongst Sherman's army, as it was in Northern papers, but it was a kick in the gut to the Union Army, but as a country to the whole. Now again, McPherson was seen as someone who would be instrumental in uniting the country's post-war, and many felt that he was someone who would probably be president someday.
Yeah, and that's the impression I get from reading, other accounts. Howard mentions it in his memoirs. There's our Howard reference. And Howard details that, McPherson was said to have entered a wooded area, traveled only about 150 yards when he heard the cry of halt. And then he lifted his hand as if to salute and then ride away. And Howard also mentions that McPherson may have had important orders from Sherman on his person, and that a Confederate soldier briefly had them, but then he is one of the ones that get captured, so the orders don't disappear. And then Howard wrote that the mourning of our favorite young commander, McPherson, was heartfelt and widespread. No patriot soldier today is more tenderly remembered in our land. Soon after his death, Howard will write his wife, Lizzie, and said, "We were all made sad yesterday by the death of General McPherson. So young, so noble, so promising, already commanding a department." And he mentions that his wife had met him, before the war. And he said some of this command was taken by surprise. And he explains that they made a wide circuit and went around his one flank. And he said he does tell of the body being brought to General Sherman's headquarters, but that Howard does not see him there. And he said the rebels' surprise, though not producing any irreparable disaster, was bad enough. They got from McPherson quite a number of guns. In this same letter, Howard also states that Hood was a classmate of McPherson. Hood, is a stupid fellow, but a hard fighter, does very unexpected things. Wow. So that's how he ends the letter. Of McPherson's death, General Grant would say that the Army lost one of its ablest, purest, and best generals. And this is a guy who, Grant is east by this point, but McPherson, I think, really was able to grow a lot under Grant, much the same way you see Sherman, become a better soldier under Grant after Sherman had that breakdown in Kentucky. So McPherson's one of these guys that is able to grow under Grant really, really well.
Yeah, who has had a breakdown in Kentucky?
Oh, God. But the thing with Sherman, or with McPherson, it's going to leave a spot. Someone's got to command Army of the Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And the day that McPherson is killed, that command is going to fall to General Blackjack Logan. And he leads the Army of the Tennessee it's only 4 or 5 days. But then it's going to be General Oliver Otis Howard, as we know, that is going to take command of the Army of the Tennessee. And this is a controversial decision seen as a controversial decision by certain parties, including Logan and especially Joseph Hooker, who's not happy at all, and he asks to be relieved of duty. But this also allows, once Hooker leaves, because Slocum could not stand him, Slocum is able to be brought from Vicksburg to replace him as head of the 20th Corps. So this is another, kind of effect of McPherson being killed.
The domino effect goes all the way through, but just going back to his impact, John Bell Hood, McPherson's classmate at West Point, and is the enemy here, for him, wrote of his death and referred to him as a, quote, a fine soldier and a good man. But even popular culture talks about the importance of McPherson. In a historical novel called, quote, If the South Had Won the Civil War, a guy named Byron McKinley Cantor, McPherson survives the war, goes on to be president of the United States for 2 terms in the 1880s, and was instrumental in bringing the 2 fictional countries together as allies.
Interesting.
So even afterwards, people realized how important he was.
Yeah.
Sherman, like you said, will be haunted for years, not only about the death, but also denying that furlough to McPherson to get married. Yeah. And he felt guilt over this decision, and that would forever change his fiance's life. And you mentioned the letter that he wrote about before, but it just goes to show. That first letter was before this whole thing was killed. Yeah. When McPherson was killed, Sherman again will send Emily a message with the sad news. And this story is unbelievable, too, because, I mentioned before that her parents were very pro-secession in support of the Confederacy, as did many did in Baltimore. So when the note arrives at Emily's door in Baltimore, her mother was the one who received it. It was written by Sherman's staffer, James Van Dusen, and it said, quote, General Barry, this would be Sherman's chief of staff, William F. Barry, desires me to say that General McPherson was killed in battle yesterday. His remains were sent home last evening in charge of his staff. Emily is going to read the note silently with Emily at her side and exclaims, quote, finally some good news, he's dead. And then handed the note to his daughter, Emily. Brutal. Emily's going to read the note, run off to her bedroom, and she will stay in that bedroom for a full year.
Yeah, and the only time anybody sees her is 3 weeks after she locks herself out. She has to, I don't even think she opens the door. They just slide the letter under. But she does get a letter from General Sherman saying, "I owe you heartfelt sympathy and a sacred duty of recording the fame of one of our country's brightest and most glorious characters. I yield to none on earth but yourself the right to excel me in lamentations for our dead hero. Why should death's darts reach the young and brilliant instead of older men who could have better been spared?" And, he goes on to say, like, "I see him now, so handsome, so smiling, on his fine black horse, booted and spurred, the impersonation of the gallant knight." And he goes on to describe the death to her. And I think this is, as you said, this is going to haunt Sherman, that he didn't give McPherson leave to go marry her. And Emily would not emerge from her room until a year later, and she never marries. And she will pass away on June 15th, 1891 in Baltimore, Maryland.
You know what's so funny in the letter you wrote? The first line of the letter, it says, the one you just read about, he wrote, quote, "My dear young lady, a letter from your mother to General Barry." So the mother must have written a letter back to Sherman. And I tried to find that letter because that would have been something to see what she wrote to Sherman. But needless to say, she did write that long letter to her, and it's pretty sad. But, and this is funny, but this is where the story of McPherson's death goes off in two different directions, though. So I mentioned before that Beard, 11 years later, wrote his account of what happened. He was there. And at the moment of McPherson's death, no one really knew what happened to him, even his staffers, because they get out so quickly. Sherman wrote about it in his memoirs, which included so many errors that it compelled Captain Beard to write that article 11 years later in the first place. Sherman reported McPherson was murdered by Confederate bushwhackers, and after his death, the bushwhackers not only stole his papers and his pocketbook, they robbed him of his clothes.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a little bit ago, it is true that some of McPherson's papers were found on a captured Confederate. Admittedly, this was from a different company than Beard's, but according to Beard, the only item taken was that hat I mentioned earlier, right? Colonel Strong from McPherson's staff reported that when he returned to drive off the rebels, he saw them stripping the body. According to Colonel Strong, he said the only clothes left on McPherson's body was a single sock and one of his gloves that contained a diamond ring that the Rebs must have missed. I mean, that's just random.
Yeah.
The Northern papers loved this story of chivalry, as Strong put it, because Strong says he put the naked body of McPherson on a horse and rode it back to Sherman's headquarters. Another Northern paper from Indiana claimed that only McPherson's boots were taken and nothing else. So these stories seem to be debunked for a few different reasons.
Yeah.
But first, Sherman never mentioned McPherson's body being naked at the Hurt House. I mean, this wasn't the bank barn here, right?
Jeez.
He just said he put him on the door. Also, McPherson's mother wrote afterwards that a nurse, none other than Mary Ann Bickerdike Mary, the woman Sherman famously said outranks him, she mailed McPherson's bloody shirt back to her in Clyde.
Ugh.
So the stories of a naked James McPherson are likely false. So sorry, Mary.
Ew.
Unfortunately, you have to take that visual right out of your head. Oh. Now, McPherson's body, just as Sherman said in his letter to Emily, was returned to Clyde, Ohio, and is buried in Evergreen Cemetery, now McPherson Cemetery, across the street from his boyhood home that he shared with his mother, Cynthia. Now, locals wanted a statue to be built of their fallen hero, but the process was a lot harder than they ever imagined, and raising money was hard, but the location was even problematic. They thought West Point would be the place for it, but eventually they said, well, Clyde, we should do it. There was a McPherson Monument Society formed by Captain Ralph Buckland and Captain John Lemon, who were in charge of the fundraising. Now, this process was going absolutely nowhere, but then a rumor started that grave robbers were planning to steal McPherson's body and take it to Washington. Now, the story is exaggerated, but there's actually some truth to it. In 1876, a statue of McPherson was dedicated in Washington thanks to General Grant, right? Emily Hoffman, McPherson's fiancée, wanted his body moved from Clyde to Washington at the site of a statue. McPherson's mother apparently was on board with the idea, But once the rumors came out that this might actually happen, they were going to lose his body to Washington, locals quickly raised the funds to build that statue that will be placed at his gravesite in the cemetery. The statue was sculpted by a Cincinnati artist named Louis Robisso. He was the same man who did that one in Washington and McPherson as well. On July 22nd, 1881, the 17th anniversary of McPherson's death, with 15,000 people on hand, including Sherman and Rutherford B. Hayes. President Garfield was scheduled to attend, but, well, he was shot a few weeks earlier on July 2nd, so he couldn't make it.
He couldn't make it.
He sent his apologies. But Captain Charles McCleary of the 72nd Ohio, who fought with McPherson at Shiloh, he escorted his mother, Cynthia, to the statue, who remarked, quote, "I'm glad it's over and my son has a fitting monument." Now, she'll die herself in 1883 and she'll be buried near James, as well as her late husband, William, who died way back there in 1847. And so the debate with McPherson is, he will go down as arguably the highest-ranking Union officer killed in the war. And I say arguably because there are those people out there who feel that John Sedgwick, who was killed by a sharpshooter before the Battle of Spotsylvania, is ranked higher since he got his general's star on 8/31/61, a full year before McPherson. Right? Who knows? But the truth of the matter is McPherson commanded an army while Sedgwick commanded a corps.
Yeah.
So you're going to take that into account.
And that's not to demean on Sedgwick at all. Like there's different ways that you can look at who is the highest ranking officer. I've had someone tell me that it was John Reynolds.
Well, that thing, Reynolds was, he's one of the four major generals who was killed in the Civil War. He's killed at Gettysburg. James Mansfield's going to be killed at Antietam. Sedgwick, of course, at Spotsylvania, and McPherson at Atlanta. They're all major generals who were killed. But again, if you're going to take a look at who's ranked higher, it's a big measuring contest. These guys, they're all long dead. Who cares? But it seems that being a further rank would make you a higher. And so some people think it's Sedgwick, and that's cool too. Whatever, knock yourself out. But what cannot be denied, Mary, is the death of James McPherson is going to be one of the great what-ifs in American history.
I would agree, because I think he would have been president, if not president, then in politics, for sure.
It's tough to say, but more than just about anybody, his life being snuffed out likely denied the country of a man with unlimited potential, right? In the post-Civil War world, whether it be politics, whether it be Reconstruction, whether it be engineering. He kind of did everything. And you mentioned before, U.S. Grant called him, his ablest and purest generals, and that's true. And Sherman had that great quote about him as well. But we'll never know what could have been. But based on his backgrounds and opinions of his peers on both sides, it's hard to disagree with Grant or Sherman or any of these people about what the death of James Birdsey McPherson ultimately did to the country. We've talked a lot about this over the years, is how many champions of business, how many politicians did this war deny this country? And when you look at Reconstruction, people talk a lot about things that went wrong and how the country didn't heal itself. But think of the men like McPherson who died and what they could have done. Same thing with James Garfield. This is people who the sky was the limit for these people, and they were all snuffed out early.
And it's really, it's, as you said, very unfortunate about McPherson, because who knows, he is one of the great what-ifs of the Civil War, and I'm really glad we finally got around to talking about his life. His life is not as detailed as Sherman or Grant or even Thomas, and I think it's because he died early and he didn't leave a lot behind either. But the other part of his story, too, to remember is you have the story of Emily Hoffman, his fiancée, who never marries, locks herself up for a year, and she's, just... obviously not a widow because she was never married, but she's what the term would be spinster her entire life.
Yeah, and she grew up in a very secession family, after the war. And so it's hard to imagine that situation when you get a knock on your door and you find out that your fiance, who couldn't get married because he was fighting, was killed, and your mother takes a victory lap over it.
Yeah.
I have to imagine she knew who James McPherson was when she read the note. So it's not like she just... It was a secret thing, like a Reynolds thing. But, hey, what can you do? Unfortunately, like I said before, it's one of those deals where we'll never know. We'll never know what could have happened with him. So it's one of those things. So, Well, I guess we can leave him there.
I think so. Yeah, that was a good episode. Thanks for bringing it like you always do. And coming up for us, we're going to be doing an episode about some female spies.
Spies?
Coming up.
Spies?
So we will post about that soon. Also, we will have it will be, I think it's the 6th Halloween Spooktacular.
Well, that's a couple months away, but that's coming down the road.
Yeah, but we are still going to do that with our friend Jen Price, or J Price as we call her on here. We are going to be having another battle episode again soon. We just have to pick a battle to talk about. And the other thing to mention as well is it is our 5th anniversary, as we mentioned earlier. And what do we have going on Saturday night?
I think the 5th anniversary is the IPA anniversary, right? That's
Yeah.
how it goes? So
Yeah.
there's no wonder. So we have a lot of fun stuff coming here at the old Circle K, Mary. We have a little celebration going on in Gettysburg on Saturday,
Yep.
which is coming up. Over at Getty's Gear
Yep.
in Baltimore Street. We're going to have a Nick Mitch, who's going to be a local musician. He's one of the real talented musicians here in
Yep.
town. He'll be playing there. So hopefully you can come see us. It's from 6 o'clock to 9 on Saturday. Also, if you can't make it, we are going to be at Spangler Spring this weekend.
Yep.
Doing a encampment with our reenactment group
Our
friends.
BMI group.
So we are going to be sleeping on the field at Gettysburg at
Yep.
Spangler Spring. Oof. So come by during the day. You can come see us. We'll be there. We'll be sleeping over at night in our tent over at Spangler Spring, and then we'll be going to the big shindig
Yep.
on Saturday night as well. So we definitely have to thank our friends at Getty's Gear, Carrie Jane, and the Great Cat are going to take us care of
Yep.
that. So off we go. And I guess we can jump this off here. But we got a lot of
Yep.
fun things coming down the road, Mary. A lot of fun things.
Yep. So thank you to for listening to this episode, as well as all the other episodes we have released over the last 5 years. We would not be here without the support of our listeners, everyone who joins us on our YouTube live streams, as well as our roundtables, which we're going to be bringing that back again soon too. It's been a crazy busy summer. So thank you to everybody, and especially to you, Darren, for being the awesome co-host that you are.
Well, I resemble that, so thank you. Anyway, appreciate it as well. You're not too bad yourself there, old Fincher. You're doing okay yourself. All right, so off we go. So hopefully we'll see you this weekend. If not, have a safe weekend. The weather is cooling off, so it's coming into that autumn time. Pumpkin beer, pumpkin coffee.
I've already had pumpkin beer. It's awesome.
And football's coming down the road. So off we go. Any final words from you, Fincheru?
Nope. Thank you again to our listeners. So we will talk to you all soon.
Peace out.
See you all later.